Keanu Reeves was almost thrown out of his own luxury restaurant. What happened next left everyone stunned. Do you enjoy stories like this? Don't forget to subscribe to Storygram for more. The soft glow of chandeliers illuminated the luxurious dining room, casting a golden light over the white linen tablecloths and crystal glasses that sparkled like jewels. The restaurant, La Maison de Luxe, was a hidden gem for the city's elite. CEOs, celebrities, and dignitaries all dined here, savoring its Michelin-starred cuisine and flawless service. Tonight, the restaurant was at capacity, and the air buzzed with quiet conversations and the faint clinking of silverware against fine china. Everything about the place exuded class and exclusivity. But the moment Keanu Reeves walked through the grand entrance, the atmosphere shifted ever so slightly. He wasn't dressed the way people expected someone to be at a restaurant like this. Instead of a tailored suit or designer outfit, Keanu wore a simple black hoodie, jeans, and worn-out sneakers. His hair was slightly messy, and he had a relaxed, laid-back air, as if he had just come from a long day exploring the city. The maitre d', an older gentleman with a neatly trimmed mustache and an air of formality, raised an eyebrow as Keanu approached the front desk. He didn't recognize him right away, at least not until he got closer. The faint flicker of recognition passed across his face, but he quickly masked it with professional composure. "Good evening, sir," the maitre d' said, forcing a polite smile. "Do you have a reservation?" Keanu pulled out his phone, scrolling through the confirmation email. "Yeah, under Reeves?" The maitre d' found the reservation and nodded. "Ah, yes, Mr. Reeves. Right this way." He led Keanu through the grand dining room, past tables occupied by wealthy patrons dressed to the nines. Some of them glanced up, their eyes lingering on Keanu with subtle curiosity, wondering how someone so plainly dressed had found his way into a place like this. But Keanu, as always, remained unfazed. He followed the maitre d' to a small table near the window, where candlelight flickered against the glass. As he settled into his seat, Keanu took a moment to admire the view of the city skyline, its twinkling lights creating a serene backdrop. He wasn't here for the attention or the exclusivity. He had come for the food and a moment of peace. Unfortunately, peace wasn't what he was going to get. Across the room, a waiter named Ryan noticed Keanu and frowned. Ryan was in his mid-30s, with neatly combed hair and a crisp uniform. He had been working at La Maison de Luxe for 5 years, and in that time, he had learned to spot which customers were worth his time and which ones weren't. The high-paying regulars received his best service, while those who looked out of place, like Keanu, were often met with subtle disdain. Ryan grabbed a notepad and made his way toward Keanu's table, his expression neutral but his posture rigid. "Good evening," he said, barely glancing at Keanu. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" "Just water, please," Keanu replied, offering a polite smile. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "No wine? No cocktail?" "Water's fine," Keanu said. The waiter sighed, scribbling on his notepad before walking away. As he made his way back to the kitchen, he passed by a group of servers gathered near the counter. With a smirk, he leaned in and whispered, "Looks like we've got a lost tourist over at table 5. The other servers chuckled, glancing in Keanu's direction. "Think he knows where he is?" one of them asked. "Doubt it," Ryan replied. "Probably just walked in off the street. I'll be surprised if he can even afford the appetizers." The comment earned a few more laughs, and Ryan returned to Keanu's table with a glass of water. He set it down without much care, causing a few droplets to splash onto the tablecloth. Keanu noticed, but didn't say anything. "Are you ready to order?" Ryan asked, his tone lacking the warmth he usually reserved for high-profile guests. Keanu glanced at the menu, his eyes scanning the options. "I'll take the chef special." Ryan blinked, momentarily caught off guard. The chef special was one of the most expensive items on the menu, a multi-course meal crafted from seasonal ingredients. It wasn't something people typically ordered unless they were familiar with the restaurant's reputation and its prices. "Are you sure?" Ryan asked, unable to hide the skepticism in his voice. Keanu looked up, meeting the waiter's gaze. "Yeah, I'm sure." Ryan scribbled down the order, still doubtful. As he walked away, he muttered under his breath, "Hope he brought his wallet." Meanwhile, In the kitchen, the head chef was reviewing the night's orders when he noticed the ticket for table 5. His eyes widened slightly when he saw the name Reeves next to the order for the chef special. "Wait a minute," the chef said, turning to one of his assistants. "Is that Keanu Reeves?" "I think so," the assistant replied. "But he's not dressed like you'd expect." The chef chuckled. "Doesn't matter what he's wearing. The man owns half the world. Make sure his meal is perfect." As the kitchen staff got to work, Ryan returned to his group of servers near the counter, still unaware of who Keanu really was. "Let's see if he makes it past the first course without choking on the bill," he joked. But just as the laughter died down, the maitre d' approached Ryan with a serious expression. "A word, please," he said, motioning for Ryan to follow him into a side hallway. Ryan, confused but compliant, followed the maitre d'. "What's this about?" he asked. The maitre d' folded his arms, his gaze stern. "Do you have any idea who you're serving at table 5? Ryan shrugged. "Some guy in a hoodie who probably can't afford the breadbasket." The maitre d's jaw tightened. "That guy in a hoodie is Keanu Reeves. And he's not just a guest, he's the owner of this restaurant." Ryan blinked, the weight of the maitre d's words hitting him like a punch to the gut. "Keanu Reeves is the owner of this restaurant?" His mind raced, replaying every interaction he had just had with the man. His dismissive tone, the splash of water on the tablecloth, and the joke about the bill. "You're joking, right?" Ryan said, forcing a laugh to mask his growing panic. The maitre d's expression didn't change. "I'm dead serious. And if you value your job, I suggest you start treating him with the respect he deserves." Ryan felt his stomach churn. He had been working at La Maison Deluxe long enough to know that the clientele here were powerful and influential. If Keanu decided to make a complaint, Ryan's career could be over in an instant. He wiped his sweaty palms on his apron and swallowed hard. "What should I do now?" The maitre d' sighed. "For starters, apologize. Then make sure the rest of his experience is flawless." And Ryan, he paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Don't make it worse." With a nod, Ryan turned and made his way back toward the dining area. His heart pounded in his chest as he rehearsed what he was going to say. "Just apologize. Be polite. Fix this." As he approached Keanu's table, he noticed the actor was calmly scrolling through his phone, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding behind the scenes. The chef's special hadn't been served yet, which meant Ryan still had time to redeem himself. He took a deep breath, forcing a polite smile onto his face. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness gnawing at him. "I'd like to apologize for earlier. I realize I may not have been as welcoming as I should have been." Keanu looked up, his expression neutral. For a moment, he said nothing, letting the silence hang between them. Then he nodded slowly. "Apology accepted." Relieved but still cautious, Ryan continued. "If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to let me know. I'll personally make sure everything is perfect from here on out." Keanu smiled faintly, as if he could see right through the waiter's attempt to salvage the situation. "Thanks. I appreciate that." Ryan excused himself and hurried back to the kitchen, where the head chef was plating the first course of the chef's special, a beautifully arranged dish of seared scallops, garnished with edible flowers and drizzled with a truffle reduction. "Is it ready?" Ryan asked, wiping his brow. The chef handed him the plate. "It's perfect. Don't mess this up." With extreme caution, Ryan carried the dish back to Keanu's table and placed it gently in front of him. "Your first course, sir. Enjoy." Keanu picked up his fork and tasted the scallops. The flavors melted together perfectly, a testament to the restaurant's reputation. He nodded approvingly and continued eating, leaving Ryan to breathe a small sigh of relief. So far, so good. But across the room, a group of diners had begun whispering among themselves. Word had spread quickly among the staff, and it didn't take long for the information to reach the guests. "Keanu Reeves is here, and he owns the place." One woman, dressed in a sparkling evening gown, leaned over to her companion and whispered, "I can't believe I didn't recognize him sooner. He's so low-key." Her companion chuckled. "That's what makes him different from most celebrities. He doesn't flaunt it. Ryan noticed the growing attention and felt his anxiety spike again. If Keanu realized that everyone in the restaurant was now watching him, it could make the situation even more awkward. He needed to keep things under control. Back in the kitchen, the head chef was monitoring the progress of the chef's special. Each course was timed perfectly to ensure a seamless dining experience. The second course, handmade saffron risotto with wild mushrooms, was nearly ready, and the dessert station was already preparing the finishing touches for the final course. But as the head chef turned to check on the progress, he noticed one of the sous chefs fumbling with a tray of delicate pastries. Before he could intervene, the tray tipped, sending the pastries crashing to the floor. "Clean that up," the chef barked, his voice cutting through the kitchen noise. "We don't have time for mistakes tonight." Ryan, hearing the commotion from the doorway, felt a knot form in his stomach. The night had already been tense enough, and the last thing he needed was a kitchen disaster that could delay Keanu's meal. He rushed over to the chef. "Is everything okay?" "We're fine," the chef replied, his tone sharp. "Just make sure Mr. Reeves doesn't notice any delays." Ryan nodded and returned to the dining room, where Keanu was finishing his first course. He approached the table with another glass of water, careful this time not to spill a drop. "Everything to your liking so far, Mr. Reeves?" he asked. Keanu set down his fork and wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Yeah, it's great. Compliments to the chef." Ryan smiled, feeling a small wave of relief wash over him. If he could just get through the rest of the meal without any more hiccups, he might be able to salvage the situation entirely. But fate wasn't done testing him yet. Just as the second course was being served, a man at a nearby table accidentally knocked over a bottle of wine, sending red liquid cascading across the white tablecloth. The sudden commotion drew the attention of several guests, including Keanu, who glanced over briefly before returning his attention to his meal. Ryan rushed over with a towel, helping the man clean up the mess while another server brought a fresh bottle of wine. As he worked, he couldn't help but glance at Keanu, who seemed completely unbothered by the chaos around him. How is he so calm? Ryan wondered. If it were anyone else, they'd probably be demanding a new table by now. Once the mess was cleaned up, Ryan returned to Keanu's table, determined to maintain the flow of the evening. The second course was cleared away without incident, and the third course, a tender lamb dish with rosemary juice, arrived promptly. Keanu continued to eat quietly, occasionally glancing out the window at the city lights. By the time dessert arrived, Ryan felt as though he had run a marathon. The final course, a delicate chocolate souffle served with a side of vanilla bean ice cream, was placed in front of Keanu with precision. "Your dessert, sir," Ryan said, trying to hide the exhaustion in his voice. Keanu smiled, taking a spoonful of the souffle. "Delicious." For the first time all evening, Ryan allowed himself to relax. The meal was almost over, and it seemed like he had managed to recover from his initial mistake. But he had no idea what was coming next. The dinner service had gone smoother than Ryan had expected, after his rocky start, that is. With the dessert now being enjoyed, the waiter allowed himself to finally breathe. But as Keanu quietly savored his chocolate souffle, the restaurant's energy had shifted once again. More and more guests were whispering, pointing discreetly in Keanu's direction. Even though he was casually dressed, there was no mistaking him now. The news had spread beyond just the staff, and soon the entire room seemed to be aware of who he was. But Keanu, ever composed, continued eating as if he were just another patron. Ryan, still observing from across the room, wiped his palms on his apron again. He could feel the weight of his earlier behavior pressing down on him. Sure, Keanu had accepted his apology, but what if it wasn't enough? What if he reported the incident to the maitre d', or worse, the restaurant's investors? This wasn't just about losing his job. It was about what kind of impression he had left on someone who could easily make or break his career. As Ryan contemplated his next move, the maitre d' approached Keanu's table, bowing slightly. "Mr. Reeves, would you care for an after-dinner drink? We have an excellent selection of aged scotch and cognac." Keanu shook his head politely. "Just a coffee, please." "Of course," the maitre d' said, signaling for Ryan to bring it. Ryan seized the opportunity. He grabbed the finest coffee the restaurant had and made sure it was brewed to perfection. As he carefully placed the cup in front of Keanu, he hesitated for a moment. "Mr. Reeves, may I say something?" Keanu looked up, his gaze calm but curious. "Go ahead." Ryan swallowed hard. "I just wanted to say that I've learned my lesson tonight. I shouldn't have judged you based on appearances, and I'm genuinely sorry for how I treated you. It won't happen again." Keanu nodded thoughtfully, taking a sip of his coffee. "I appreciate that, Ryan, but it's not me you need to worry about." Ryan blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Keanu set down his cup, leaning back slightly in his chair. "You don't know who's sitting in any of these chairs. It could be someone important, or it could be someone just having a rough day. Either way, they deserve the same respect." Ryan's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "You're right. I understand that now." Keanu's expression softened. "Good, just remember, what you do when no one's watching says a lot about who you are." The words hit Ryan harder than any reprimand ever could. He nodded, feeling a mix of shame and determination. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves." Back at the maitre d's station, the head chef had just stepped out of the kitchen to check on the final course reports. He spotted Ryan walking back toward the counter, a thoughtful expression on his face. "How'd it go?" the chef asked, folding his arms. Ryan exhaled slowly. "He accepted my apology." The chef smirked. "Lucky you. Not everyone gets a second chance with someone like him." Ryan nodded. "I won't waste it." But just as Ryan was beginning to feel some relief, the maitre d' received a phone call from the restaurant's general manager. His expression shifted from neutral to concerned as he listened to the voice on the other end. When he hung up, he turned to Ryan. "The general manager wants to speak with you after your shift." Ryan's stomach dropped. "About what?" The maitre d' sighed. "We'll see. Just finish your shift strong and hope for the best." Meanwhile, Keanu finished his coffee and signaled for the check. The maitre d' approached with the bill, but Keanu waved him off. "It's my restaurant. I'm not paying myself," he joked. The maitre d' chuckled. "Of course, sir." As Keanu stood up to leave, several diners subtly tried to capture photos of him, but he ignored them. He approached the maitre d' and whispered something that made the older man nod seriously. Then, with one final glance around the room, Keanu walked out of the restaurant and into the night. Ryan watched him leave, unsure whether to feel relieved or more anxious. The next few hours dragged on as he finished his shift, constantly replaying the night's events in his head. When the last guest had left and the restaurant was being cleaned up, he made his way to the general manager's office, his heart pounding. The general manager, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and an air of authority, gestured for Ryan to sit down. "I spoke with the maitre d' about tonight," she began, "and I understand there was a bit of a misunderstanding with Mr. Reeves." Ryan nodded, unable to meet her gaze. "Yes, ma'am. I made a mistake. I apologized to him, and he accepted it. I know I shouldn't have judged him." She leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against her notepad. "Mr. Reeves left specific instructions for how he wanted us to handle this situation." Ryan's breath hitched. "He did?" The general manager nodded. "He doesn't want you fired. In fact, he thinks you're capable of learning from this experience. But he did leave one condition." "What condition?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The general manager smiled faintly. "He suggested you spend the next month working closely with the maitre d' on guest relations. You'll learn how to spot subtle cues, how to treat every guest with the same level of respect, and most importantly, how to ensure this doesn't happen again." Ryan's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I can do that. I'll do whatever it takes." The general manager stood up, extending her hand. "Good, don't waste this chance." Ryan shook her hand firmly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. As he left the office and stepped out into the cool night air, he realized that tonight had been more than just a mistake. It had been a turning point. And thanks to Keanu Reeves, he had a second chance to make things right. The night air felt colder than usual as Ryan walked down the street, his mind replaying every moment from the evening. From the initial mistake to Keanu's calm but impactful words, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was a lesson he was meant to learn. He had heard plenty of motivational speeches about humility and respect during staff meetings, but this time, It wasn't just a lecture. It was real, personal, and unforgettable. A few blocks away, Keanu Reeves sat in the back of a sleek black car, his phone vibrating softly in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a message from the general manager of the restaurant. Ryan understood the message. He's agreed to work on improving guest relations as you suggested. Keanu smiled faintly, leaning back against the seat. He wasn't interested in punishing people or watching them suffer for their mistakes. He believed in giving others the chance to grow, especially when they showed genuine remorse. Ryan had made a mistake, but more importantly, he had taken responsibility for it. As the car sped through the city, Keanu thought back to the many times in his own life when he had been underestimated or misjudged. The way Ryan had treated him wasn't unique. He'd faced similar situations before, but his experiences had shaped him into someone who could handle it with grace. He wasn't one to dwell on negativity, but he hoped that tonight's events would leave a lasting impact, not just on Ryan, but on everyone in that restaurant who had witnessed what happened. Because if there was one thing Keanu believed in, it was that change started with small, individual actions. The next morning, Ryan arrived at the restaurant early, determined to prove himself. The maitre d' greeted him with a raised eyebrow. "You're here earlier than usual," he said. Ryan nodded. "I figured I'd get a head start." The maitre d' smirked. "Good out, let's see if you can keep that energy up for the whole month." They spent the morning reviewing past service reports, identifying common mistakes, and discussing how to handle difficult guests. Ryan listened intently, asking questions and taking notes. For the first time in a long while, he felt motivated to improve, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves was back in his usual routine, working on upcoming projects, attending meetings, and quietly navigating the world without much fanfare. But his night at the restaurant wasn't far from his mind. He received another message from the general manager a few days later. "Ryan's making progress. He's more attentive and respectful with guests. I think your advice really got through to him." Keanu replied with a simple, "Good to hear," before putting his phone away. He didn't need constant updates. He trusted that the lesson had been learned. A month later, Keanu found himself back at La Maison de Luxe, this time accompanied by a few friends. The maitre d' greeted him warmly, leading him to a private table tucked away in a quiet corner. The atmosphere was as elegant as ever, and Keanu felt a sense of nostalgia as he glanced around the familiar dining room. As he settled into his seat, he noticed Ryan approaching the table, his posture more confident and his expression genuine. "Mr. Reeves, welcome back," Ryan said, smiling. "It's good to see you again." Keanu returned the smile. "Good to be back." Ryan handed him the menu, but before leaving, he paused. "I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for that night, but for giving me a chance to learn and grow. I didn't realize how much I needed it." Keanu nodded. "You're welcome, Ryan, and remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being better than you were yesterday." Ryan chuckled softly. "I'll keep that in mind." As Ryan walked away to retrieve their drinks, Keanu's friends leaned in, curious. "So, what's the story with that waiter? He seemed extra grateful to see you." Keanu smirked. "Just someone who learned the value of second chances." His friends exchanged knowing glances, but didn't press further. They knew that Keanu had a knack for leaving a positive impact wherever he went, and this seemed like just another example of that. As the evening progressed, the conversation at Keanu's table shifted from lighthearted topics to more meaningful discussions about life, success, and the importance of staying grounded. Keanu's experiences had taught him that fame and fortune didn't define a person's character. How they treated others did. By the time dessert arrived, Ryan was back at their table, serving the final course with the same level of care and attention he had once reserved only for high-profile guests. But this time, it wasn't about who Keanu was, it was about who Ryan had become. He had learned that every guest, no matter their appearance or status, deserved the best service. As Keanu took his last bite of the rich chocolate mousse, he felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond the food. Tonight wasn't just about fine dining. It was about seeing firsthand how change could happen when someone was given the opportunity to grow. Before leaving, Keanu shook Ryan's hand. "Keep it up," he said. "You're on the right path." Ryan's grip was firm, his smile genuine. "Thanks to you." Keanu nodded and exited the restaurant, stepping into the cool night air. The city lights flickered around him, but he didn't feel the need to rush. He knew that the lessons learned tonight would ripple far beyond the walls of the restaurant, creating small but meaningful changes in the lives of those who had witnessed it. Because, as Keanu believed, real change doesn't always come from grand gestures. It starts with the way you treat people when no one's watching.